Hello, hello, book lovers. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 8 of the Biblio Files. I'm your host, Jack from Jack in the Book Stack, and today's guest, we have Johanna here with us. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Jack. Thank you so
Hi.
much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like it's about time because you've had me on your channel a couple times for the Why Read series and also the Game of Thrones discussion. So I'm super excited to have you on an episode of Biblio Files.
Yay. I'm excited to be here. Your channel is one of my favorites that doesn't focus on just fantasy because so I like to watch a variety of booktube channels, but I really love that yours explores fantasy, but also explores other genres I don't read. So I always enjoy your content.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I like to do a big variety. So all right, well, before we jump into the actual interview, can you give a description of your booktube channel and what folks can expect to find when they go to your videos?
Sure. Yeah. So my channel is mostly just on the books I read. And I try to focus mostly on fantasy because that is my favorite genre. I love fantasy. I love fantasy awash. I love fantasy awash. I love fantasy books, but I kind of was joking with myself about it last year because as much as I love fantasy, if you watch my top 10 video for 2022, I have a lot of non-fantasy books on that top 10 video. So I was kind of joking to myself, like, maybe I'm a little bit of a fantasy fraud, but I do read other genres as well. I do enjoy mixing it up. So I just basically talk about the books that I'm loving and that I'm reading.
Yeah, see, it's a balance too. Got to mix it up. All right. Well, if you have not seen an episode of the Biblio Files before, I know Johanna has tuned into a couple. But what we're going to do today is I am going to ask Johanna 10 bookish questions. They vary in difficulty. I don't know. I think Johanna saw these questions and thinks some of them might be kind of intimidating. But we're going to go through those 10 questions. And then I have 5. Typically, they're would you rather questions, but this round I actually did a spin. There's a mix of would you rathers and like a this or that challenge where I'm going to make you choose between two bookish things. So it should be a pretty good time. And for everybody tuning in, we definitely want to hear from you guys as well in the comments, or if you have questions for either one of us. Should be a good time. We'll see if we can stump Johanna on some of these.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, a good mix. Well, we'll start things off pretty easy. I have 3 questions that I ask every guest when they start. So first of all, what are you reading right now?
I'm so excited to answer this because some people know one of the books I'm reading right now, but a lot of people, actually only one person, I told only one other person the other book I'm reading right now. So I'm going to announce it here. But the book I'm reading right now that most people know about is A Dance with Dragons, and that's a reread. So I've been rereading A Song of Ice and Fire this year. A Dance with Dragons is book 5 in the series, and it is a chunky book. So it's taking me a while. I've been reading it for over a week, and I feel like I don't even know if I'm at 30% into the ebook.
Wow.
It's taking me forever, but I'm a slow reader and I've been taking my time with it. But the other book that I'm reading that I haven't told anybody except my friend Alan from Library of Alexandria, I told him earlier today because it came up in conversation. But I'm actually rereading via audio Midnight Tides, which is book 5 in Malazan Book of the Fallen. And so I'm rereading that via audio, which I never in my wildest dreams thought that I could follow a Malazan audiobook without the words in front of me because those books, I found them quite dense as a first-time reader, and it's so different as a rereader. It's just like the most amazing. It's so different.
Because like you're not focusing so much, I imagine, on the complexities. You have an idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's so different. I feel like that was the reason I ended up talking with my friend Alan because I saw him on another show on Books with Banks. It was a fantastic discussion there, but they were talking about the conversation because there's a lot of conversation on BookTube, as Philip Chase knows, about how complex Malazan is. And I think where I stand on that is that if you're, at least for me, and this is just speaking for myself, because this is the hard part. I feel like a lot of people are speaking from their own level of experience. And some of us have more literary skills than others, I would say. But as for myself, when I read the series the first time, I loved it. I loved it as a first time reader. However, I found it very challenging because the way that Erickson, the way he introduces information, he doesn't give you all the context right away. So you're kind of just immersed. It's like being immersed in a new language. And I know that you're learning Spanish right now. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm terrible with languages. I grew up in a bilingual household. My parents frequently speak Spanish in front of me, and I still have no clue what they're saying ever.
Really?
So yeah, I'm terrible with languages. So my brain just doesn't work well that way. But when I was reading Malazan, that was the hard part, is that I just like, I couldn't wrap my head around a lot of things happening, but I just tried to be okay with that as much as possible and try to focus on what I could understand. And usually that came from a very emotional place because
Mhm.
there were a lot of really emotional themes and character moments. And so even though I didn't understand some of the terminology he was throwing out there that's related to the series specifically, and some of the things happening, it was a struggle because of those things, but I did enjoy what I enjoyed. But as a rereader, I'm like, I have the context now. It feels like I understand so much more than I did the first time. And there are still things I'm sure that I could understand further, but it's a very different experience. So for me, I say if you're a first time reader and you're struggling, I hear you, I feel you. Uh, There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just that you're not given all the context with all this
You're
information.
supposed to be confused, it
You
sounds like.
kind of are, I think. I think so. Yeah. But then when you get to the end and you finish the last book and then you go back and even read the prologue of the first book, you're like, "Whoa, I totally understand all this." And then it's like hearing elementary Spanish after you've graduated from like 5th grade
Intermediate.
Spanish or something.
Yeah. And it's so funny. That's exactly kind of what Fantasy Awash is saying, is that it just clicks. It sounds like the story is just clicking for you.
Yes.
So
Yes,
yeah.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, similarly, if you can understand the world, the foundation in this book series, maybe it makes it a little bit better. Can we expect to see a video on your experience with this reread? Any kind of
Yeah,
review?
I don't know. I've thought about it. I've thought about kind of chiming into the conversation because I actually have a lot of thoughts about this particular topic. And I know I've talked to you on my channel about my interest right now in YA, like young adult, and what makes YA, what makes adult adult. So I was thinking that maybe that could be part of a broader conversation on this topic, but I'm still kind of gathering thoughts about it because I feel like there are a lot of different moving parts to consider. So maybe, but the real reason that I was inspired to jump into the reread is because I do have a group of friends, and like my friend Alex from Tall Guy Reads, who's in the Grimoire Discord where I'm part of. I'm a co-owner of the Grimoire Discord, and he is hosting a read along with Malazan. And right now they are on Midnight Tides. And he asked me if I wanted to be a guest on one of his live shows for the series, and he let me choose which book. And so I asked him, I said, "Can I be a guest for book 5?" Because that book really, really particularly stood out to me as far as themes and as far as like connecting it to real world experience. So there was something in me that just felt called to reread that particular book. And so that was actually the incentive, is I want to be part of that discussion, but I just kind of want to refresh my brain on what happened in that particular story.
Okay. That's a good reason.
Yeah.
Philip says, if you're not confused, you're doing something wrong. I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm always intimidated by this series because I hear it's super complex and you have to take notes, and I'll get to it one day. Especially
Everyone is, and you have to be aware that everyone is different about that. Everyone is coming from a different place. Some people can read the series and not take notes and feel just fine. Some people, like me, I found I appreciated it more when I did tabs and I took notes and I looked back at things and was able to connect themes that way. With some people, they appreciate looking at external resources. I didn't want to do that after a while because I was like, no, that's like homework. I don't want to do homework for a series I'm reading. But different people are going to have different ways of engaging with the text at different levels, and it's okay with wherever you are. You can enjoy it on any level. It's just going to be different. It's just going to be different. You just kind of have to adjust to what works for you.
Well, you'll be my Spark Notes when I start it.
Sure. I'd love to.
Yeah. Well, for question number 2, you kind of touched on this when you talked about your channel, but your most read genre, and how about subgenre?
Okay, so I think at this point, I can safely say that my most read genre is fantasy. It's just the genre that I gravitate towards the most. And as far as subgenre, it's so funny that this question is here because this is actually a question that I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially when it comes to fantasy. There are so many different subgenres of fantasy. And I've been curious I feel like sometimes the definition of a subgenre might be a little bit reductive to describe a book and might pigeonhole a book in a way that disregards some of the other unique aspects that a book has to offer. But at the same time, I think, like we said in the Why Read episode, that subgenres can also be helpful because it can help you figure out the vibe that you're looking for. Like, for example, you were saying, sometimes maybe you want a cozy fantasy book. Then if you want cozy fantasy, I don't think Malazan would be your vibe. That probably wouldn't be the right type of story. But, Legends and Lattes, I think it fits that subgenre. So I think different kinds of subgenres can be helpful. Or if you're looking for more like historical medieval fantasy and somebody offers you the Dresden Files, which is an urban fantasy series I haven't read, but my understanding is it's urban fantasy, that might give you the wrong idea or it might not work for you. So I think subgenres are important. As far as my most read subgenre, I'm not sure because I'm still trying to understand this topic in depth, but I'm going to guess it's going to be probably split between high fantasy and epic fantasy. I have read not a lot of grimdark, but I've read a few grimdark series at this point. Like I've read the first Lost series, like all those books, and Baker's Prince of Nothing trilogy, which are probably the darkest fantasy books I've ever read, and the Obsidian Path trilogy by Michael R. Fletcher, which I would say is pretty dark. So I don't know, but I think it would be epic fantasy.
That seems about accurate based on what I see on your channel. But Fantasy Awash has an idea for you. If Cormac McCarthy could be a subgenre.
Totally. Yeah. It really should be. It should be its own subgenre. I mean, I know it's considered literary fiction. I think it could be. It's so it feels so nihilistic to me sometimes that like if it were fantasy, it'd probably be maybe dark fantasy or grimdark, however you define those two terms. But it's pretty bleak. And at the same time, it feels like it could fit for fantasy readers because it is so atmospheric. It is I say Blood Meridian is probably the most atmospheric book I have ever read, hands down. Like as far as setting, the mood, the tone, the way he describes the cactus in so many variations, I felt like I was there. I felt so immersed. And I think he has a gift. Even though his prose is very unconventional, he doesn't use the typical quotation marks and punctuation marks we're used to. You get used to it though. Somehow it
do
works.
you? I don't know if you do.
Yeah.
Oh.
He does it. I don't think anybody could just do it. But he does it. He manages it because somehow I could follow it. And I did go back and forth, I'll be honest, when especially Blood Meridian, taking the advice of a lot of literary channels here on YouTube. I did listen to the audiobook while I was reading it. And that was what was recommended because it's more of like an oral form. Like it's meant to be heard out loud. I think that was the way he intended it. It's like poetry. But yeah, Piranesi is also, by the way, one of the best atmospheric fantasy books as well. I am with you, Fantasy Awash. But yeah, Blood Meridian for me was probably the most atmospheric book I've ever read. But yes, I think like even when I was just reading it on my own with my eyes, because I would go back and sometimes reread things with my eyes, I just felt like it had a flow to it. Like there was something about it. There's some kind of momentum behind his prose that just propels you forward, that just drives you through the story. And yet you're seeing this changing landscape around you. It's incredible. He's gifted. He was gifted, and sadly he passed away.
You're adding books to my TBR already.
I don't know if you'd like it because it's so bleak. It is bleak, but
Well, bleak, I mean,
fascinating.
bleak is okay. I have to be in the right mindset for it, but
Yeah.
atmosphere is one of my favorite aspects, so I really want to check it out. Hey, Covers with Cassidy. Covers with Cassidy was also a guest on the Biblio Files, episode 7, I believe. So she's
Yes.
here to watch someone else get tortured with these super difficult questions.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, this is probably the most difficult question any bookworm could possibly get. What is a favorite book of all time? It doesn't have to be number one, but I know we probably have several.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, because I know another question that's coming up, I'm going to answer this with my favorite fantasy book at this point.
Okay.
And I'm always open, like with these favorites ideas. It's really hard for me because I feel like every author has something special and unique and different to offer to the genre, and that's why it's like BookTube. Like we're grateful that we have people, but we have multiple voices on this platform because it just enriches the conversation. Diversity only adds to
Yeah.
adds to the beauty of life, right? And I think the same thing when it comes to fantasy authors and fantasy books. I'm just grateful for having variety of subgenres and genres. But I always say that, or I've often been saying lately that The Crippled God, which is book 10 in Malazan Book of the Fawn, is my favorite book because I still can't describe how that book made me feel. It's not just how it made me feel while I was reading it. It was a roller coaster while I was reading it. I do have a video of me reacting to the book at the halfway point, and then my feelings and thoughts when I finished the book. And every single emotion still stirs up in me to this day when I think about how it made me feel. I'm sure there are a lot of details I've even forgotten about the book, but it just left such an impression on me. I felt like I was flying, or I felt like I was soaring, like my soul was soaring when I finished the book.
Wow.
And it made as soon as I finished it, I felt like I get it. I know why this series is so loved. And I loved it before I finished the series, but there was nothing like it was like getting to the top of a mountain and just seeing the landscape all around you. There was something just so powerful about that. I know that Philip Chase knows what I'm talking about, and he just finished his reread of that book, not well earlier this year or last year, but it's really something that once you finish it, it's like, I understand. I understand. And I mean, it was special too, because as soon as I finished, I remember I was on a plane the next day. I finished at the end of the year in 2021. And just on my flight home, I was just in a state of awe and wonder and feeling like I could go back to book one and start this whole journey all over again.
I
Which is
don't know if
crazy.
I've ever heard you talk about this book in your
Oh,
videos, but I'm like,
I have several
oh,
several videos about it.
wow.
Yeah,
Latina Geek Girl wants to know if you've read the works of Patricia McKillip.
I have. Yes, I have. So I've talked about this in one video before, but I read several of her books, I think in my early 20s, but I remember the covers to them. So like if somebody showed me the covers, I'd be like, yes, I read that one, and I read that one, and I read that one. But I cannot remember any of the story content. I just am drawing. I don't know why. I'm not usually like that. Usually I can remember at least some imagery from the stories I've read, but I don't know why I'm blank on those stories. I do remember I enjoyed them though, because I remember checking them out from my local library and thinking, I really like this book. I'm going to check out the next book by her. And I checked out all her books that my library offered, but
Oh, wow.
I just don't
Maybe
remember
time
much.
for a reread then if you
Yeah,
liked
that'd be
it.
interesting. It would be interesting. I think she's more, I want to say more in the fairy tale kind of part of the fantasy genre.
Which I
Oh,
know
I
you like
love.
because you recommended Baron the Nightingale to me, which has that like fairy tale
Yes.
type of tone to it. So
Yes. Yes.
Storm
I
of Swords, I would
I
have
like
thought
that now
that.
and then. I do enjoy that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love Storm of Swords, but I love the Cripple God even more.
Well, apparently it's sublime.
It is
So
sublime. It is the perfect word for it. It is.
you're
Mhm.
I
Profound.
mean, you're hooking us all. I know, convincing us all to give it a shot.
It's man, yeah. I have so many thoughts about the series that I always want to talk about. So when you're ready, we should talk. When you're ready, we
Yes,
should
I
talk.
know. I feel like I've been told that I should do Wheel of Time first.
Yeah,
So that's the
I don't know.
plan.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, you know?
I don't know what I want. You can't tell me what I want.
Okay, okay. I think you might like, you said that you've been recently kind of getting into YA fantasy. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would recommend to you, since you already read part of the Winter Night trilogy, which I would say is a good bridge between YA and adult, another bridge book that I would put in older YA would be the Queens of Renthia trilogy by Sarah Beth Durst. And
Okay.
the reason I recommend that trilogy, I felt a little bit not so high on the third book. I thought the third book was the weakest for me personally, but what I really loved about that book was the setting. There's an amazing magical forest. If you like
Ooh,
magical forests and if
yeah.
you love a strong female cast, which I know you do, you're all
Yes.
about the strong female cast, then
Yes.
you've got to read that trilogy. Plus, in book one, it feels like it follows more of the YA tropes, like magical school trope, young girl coming of age. It gets a bit darker in tone at the end. I won't give away how. But in book two, you're introduced to another female character who I think is in her mid 30s and is going through a divorce. And she's fantastic.
Oh, I
Amazing female
love it.
character. Yeah.
Oh,
Amazing female character. A mother. She's a
you're
mother as
gonna
well.
you're gonna load up my TBR as always.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy that. And I would also recommend to you The Sword of Kaigen by M.L.
Just
Bond.
bought it. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
it's a really strong, I mean, it's probably one of the most popular, well-doing, self-published fantasy books of all time at this point.
Oh yeah, I see
But
it
it's
everywhere.
really good. There were some parts of it that I thought were a little clunky, and I think you'll get what I'm talking about towards the beginning and at the end. But the whole middle section, the parts that are good are better than much traditionally published fantasy, in my opinion. I mean, they're
Oh,
really
cool.
good. Yeah, they're
Awesome. I will be
amazing.
checking it
And
out.
another amazing female mother character, which we just don't get enough of in fantasy.
Absolutely. I'm here for it.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we're going to get to the more difficult questions now. Those are the 3 easy ones. So,
Oh, no. Yeah.
all right.
That's it.
What is a book outside of your primary genre, which you said is fantasy, that is on your favorites list?
Well, Philip Chase is in the chat, so he'll know this, but I wonder if somebody else said this too. I'm looking up here. I thought somebody mentioned it, but maybe not. For me, it's definitely going to be Stoner by John Williams. And so that's a literary fiction book. It's a lot of people are considering it to be more of a modern classic. And yes, John Williams is the same author that wrote Augustus, who Fantasy Awash is mentioning there in the chat. And I loved Augustus as well. This author, I consider at this point, after reading 3 books by him, he's only really known for 3 books, sadly. And it's just such a tragedy that he didn't publish more books before his death. There's one other book he published, but he kind of removed himself from it. Apparently, it's not, he didn't even consider it good. So I haven't checked it out. But John Williams' Stoner hit me on so many emotional levels. And oh man, it's such a good book. It's so good. And Augustus too, but especially Stoner.
Don't you have coming up or already done recently a live show discussion on it? Isn't there one?
Yeah. Yeah. So I just the other night was in a wonderful discussion with Philip Chase and Murphy Napier and Alan from Library of Alexandria and Jimmy from the Fantasy Network. So we all discussed Stoner together. And I don't know whose channel that's coming out on. Murphy hosted it, but I think it might end up actually on Alan's channel. So I will just keep everybody posted. And I promise once it comes out, I will post it in my community tab and talk about it because it was a really special discussion for me personally. It was one of my favorites because, I mean, there's nothing more special, as we all know here on BookTube, there's nothing more special than sharing a book that you love with people you love, with your friends. And it's also really special because it affected each of us in a significant way, I would say, and maybe in different ways for each of us. But just having this shared passion and being able to enrich our perspective of the book through that discussion was such a special experience. So
Only
yeah,
if you like it too, right? If you're sharing it with people that didn't love it as much as you did, then it's a battle.
That's sad to me. Yeah, that's a sad experience to me when somebody didn't like a book. Like if Philip Chase, if he did not like that book, I would have been crushed. I would have been so sad. And same with Murphy. I was scared with Murphy of like thinking, oh man, I hope she likes it. And I watched her vlog and it was really good. She talked about it in her vlog. But I felt like that discussion, I feel like we all just added even more. I mean, I think that everybody enriched my perspective of the book even more. And I just finished a reread of that. This is like my year of the reread. It's crazy, but
That's
I love
good.
that.
It deepens your appreciation and understanding of it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
rereads
It's
are
a
awesome.
very special book to me. Very, very special. Mhm.
Another one on my TBR because of you. So
Yeah. And I do have a review on my channel for it. It's a spoilery review where I review both that alongside the book Augustus, which I also recommend highly. I highly recommend both books, Augustus, especially if you want an excellent epistolary format book on Augustus. And I'm going to be actually in a discussion on Fantasy Awash's channel, who's here in the chat. I think Alan and I are going to be talking about that pretty soon. So pretty excited about that. But Stoner, yeah. Liam, I would love to hear your thoughts on Stoner. I would just, you will either crush my heart if you don't like it or just make my heart soar if you love it. So please read it. And the
yes.
audiobook is amazing. I did listen to it via audio too.
Yeah. Hello, hello. Okay, well, how about question number 5? The last book you read because you saw it on BookTube.
That's going to be, so I was just talking about The Sword of Kaigen earlier in this chat. I read, while I was on vacation a few weeks ago, I read her new book, Blood Over Bright Haven. And I did explain in that vacation blog, or yeah, it wasn't really a vlog. It was more just like, reflections on my vacation, what I read. I mentioned in that video, I think the way that I would frame this is I feel like that book does what it sets out to do. I think she did an amazing job. She had a great intention with what she was going for, and she succeeded in delivering exactly what she was going for. Just unfortunately, it wasn't really a book that really inspired me. I don't think I was quite the right audience for the book, but I did appreciate what she did with having very distinct characters, very despicable characters. If you like to hate people in books, if you like characters that frustrate you, then you want to pick that. You probably would enjoy that book. And that particular book, I guess it's considered dark academia, but I think that's a very loose interpretation because I didn't feel quite as immersed in a school setting. There is a university setting, but really it's just about the relationship between a female character and a indigenous male character who are both receiving a lot of prejudice in this patriarchy society that's very prejudiced also towards indigenous people. And so you see how these two people from different places in privilege befriend one another, get to connect with one another and understand and learn from one another. And there's a lot to be said too about the theme of legacy and why we want to leave a legacy, whether that's for our own selfish purposes or for altruistic outcomes. And I think that the way that was explored was also pretty interesting. So again, I think it was really good in some ways. Like I think she did a great job in featuring all these aspects, but at the same time, for me, I felt like the prose was so modern that I just kept getting pulled out of the story. I thought it was good because it was distinct and it argued the point she was trying to argue, but because it felt so modern to me, it kept making me feel like I wasn't quite in the right atmosphere that the story was trying to portray. And I felt like the plot beats were kind of predictable and that some of the conversations were a little repetitive. But otherwise, I still think, it's gonna, like I said, it succeeds in doing what it intends to do.
Okay. Okay. And so that one you picked up because you saw it on BookTube? Was someone reviewing it or what made you pick it up?
Yeah, I picked it up
You
as
love
soon as
the
I
book?
saw Patrick from Patrick Reads. He did a review about like the best book of, I think it was like one of his favorites of the year. And yeah, he called it an incredible standalone. So he has highest praise for this book. So if you feel a little disappointed hearing my thoughts, check out Patrick's review. But Patrick he was the one who inspired me but part of that was also because I read The Sword of Kaigen, and The Sword of Kaigen is one of my favorite standalones of all time. So I knew that the second that Wong came out with another book, I was going to pick it up immediately. So as soon as I saw the ebook for sale, I bought it. And I took it on vacation because I did think it would be kind of a good light read. And it was. It's very accessible prose. It's very straightforward writing style. So it was an easy read. But yeah, it was mostly because I saw Patrick talk about it. I knew the author. I knew I wanted to read it. But yeah, that's why.
Okay. It's a good answer. You gave it a shot. So
yeah, I thought it was okay.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, it's still not bad.
No, not bad. Yeah. I don't regret reading it. I just think maybe it will land better for, I think, certain audiences than maybe me. So yeah.
That happens. Yeah. All right. Well, what is a popular book or series that you have no interest in reading?
Oh, man. Yeah. There are a few of those. Well, at least one that immediately comes to mind. I'm going to get in trouble with my friend here in the chat who I really love. I don't at this point have interest in reading The Wheel of Time. Now, I will never say never. There could always be a change with that. But I think part of this has to do that is funny, Laura. I think part of this has to do with the fact that my good friend Books with Brittany read that entire series a couple of years ago, and I watched her whole entire journey reading that series on her vlogs, and she has incredible vlogs. She had incredible vlogs. She's not as active on BookTube anymore, but watching her experience with that series made me think, I am never going to pick this up. I'm not going to do it. She loved it at the beginning. At the first, she was really into it. But I think the things dealing with how gender is explored, I know a lot of people talk about how cringy that is. And she just had a lot of ranty things to say, was not happy. It burned her out on fantasy for a long time. Wow. I know that there could be various experiences, though. I mean, there are books that she does not like that I've liked and vice versa. So there's still a chance I could enjoy it, but I just don't know. I don't really.
It's a commitment too. Like,
yeah,
we go into books, we pick them up because we hope to love them. So if you're picking up a 14 book commitment, you want to go into it hoping for a whole experience. So I don't blame you for shying away from it. Fantasy might. It sounds like she might blame you for not picking it up.
Well, and then Fantasy Watch saying this series is so incredibly frustrating. Okay, well, here we go. And I really appreciate everything that Laura has to say about the books too. I could be convinced someday. I think part of it too is I've just never heard a convincing enough argument as to why I would want to read it. And I feel like a lot of the people I've seen who are super fans of the series, which I can understand this because I have the same thing with different series. I feel a lot of them, they read the series when it was coming out and they have this nostalgic factor with it. Okay, I'm glad to hear that, Laura.
I thought you were encouraging her
to offend you because I know she's committed to it, and she's also doing this series on her channel where she's analyzing the TV series and comparing books to the series, which is also a TV series that, from what I've learned from a friend recently, that I probably want to avoid as well. But I don't know. Laura, you could tell us about that too. But I haven't watched that. So I haven't watched the series. I don't think I'm going to. I don't think I'm going to read the books. But yeah, that's my very unpopular opinion. And again, I could change my mind. I just haven't heard a compelling enough argument as to why I would read the series.
I don't blame you for your answer at all. I just wish this came not like the same week that I just purchased 10 of the books.
What? Are you joking?
No, I'm dead serious.
Oh, no.
I've been getting them. So I'm at like 10 of them, I think. So yeah, every time I hear like criticisms, it's like a stake to the heart because I'm like, but you know what? It's a risk that you take buying 10 books without knowing if you're going to like it.
You never know, though. You might end up loving it. You never know.
I'll give it a shot. But, in my defense, I'm buying them from Book Outlet. So they're like $7. So it's not that bad.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's true with a lot of books.
I wonder about that too, Laura, because I feel like a lot of the fans I've seen they read it when it was coming out. They read it when it was like one of their first experiences with fantasy. Maybe people think the same thing about me in A Song of Ice and Fire, because that was, I mean, I read that when I was not a teenager when I read that. I'll be clear about that. But I did read it like 12, 13 years ago. And so it's, got some nostalgia. There's a nostalgia factor that's probably there. I still think it's an amazing series, but still. So I think that nostalgia does have some weight into the fandom.
Okay. Yeah. That's true with a lot of things. Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's see. Fantasy I watched. There are some good things to the series. The way the female characters are written are so cringy. Okay. Well, I have the right expectations then. That helps me set the expectations going into it.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, let's go to question number 7. I feel like we'll have some stuff to talk about here. What is a plot pet peeve that you have in books?
Yeah. This is an interesting question. I think, sometimes I do get a little critical when when I'm able to predict a plot, because I'll be honest, I just don't feel like I'm the most plot driven reader. I just don't. Like, a lot of times, there might be a lot, like, for example, when I was reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, I gave up, like, trying to totally understand the plot for most of it. I didn't really focus on that. I was like, okay, things are happening. And then you do get to see how things come together, especially once you finish the series. But I just, I didn't want to fry my brain trying to understand all these different moving parts, because there's a lot of storylines in that series. But as far as but I do find myself, maybe because I'm not the most plot driven reader, I am more surprised than other people, I think, when certain plot twists happen. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. But that means that when I do see it coming, I'm kind of like, I saw that coming. Like, for example, with the Wong book I was just talking about, Blood Over Bright Haven, there was just a part where the character was in a situation that they were confronted by this horrible character, and I was like counting the seconds for this other character to come in and save the character. I'm like, okay, oh yeah, here it is. And it felt so lackluster to me because I saw it coming like a mile away. So I guess I do feel like maybe a little snobby if I could predict the plot a little bit. Sometimes I could predict it and don't care and still love the plot anyway. But I think one pet peeve could possibly be Deus Ex Machina. And what I mean by that is when there's maybe some kind of like godly or extra force that comes down and saves the character at the most convenient moment. And I'm not saying I always don't like that, because sometimes it can be done well. Everything can be done well. Even predictable plots can be awesome. Like, there are some predictable plots I love. There's every kind of plot device that I'm sure I've loved in the right context. But I am thinking of one book in particular where this plot device just kind of ruined the stakes for me in a story. I'm like, okay, well, I guess our characters are invincible.
I think that makes sense. How you're saying sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think I agree with you. I think when it feels like the author was facing writer's block, and this was just the only way they could get out of it, versus it feels very intentional, like it was always going that way. I think that's what would make the difference to me. Yeah. Otherwise, it just feels like random, doesn't make sense, kind of deflated.
Yes.
That's a good, not following the rules that the author themselves established.
Oh, yeah. Alan from Library of Alexandria would probably agree with you, Laura. I think he's talked about this like in terms of what's called, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think he's talked about this in terms of what he has called power creep, where suddenly the power just creeps up on the character at the end and it kind of defies the rules. So yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think I tend to agree with you. I think most people kind of would too, when it's just this awkward saves the day kind of a moment.
If it's like really convenient moment, and yeah, that's just the only thing.
Okay. Well, question number 8 is one. So as I'm watching your videos, there are some things that you constantly point out. So it seems like these are some of your favorite characteristics in books, things that make or break the book for you. So I want to know what is most important to you. prose, characters, or world building?
And it's interesting because I feel like all three of those things are so
Absolutely.
interconnected. And I don't think I used to appreciate how much those three things were interconnected until I started watching, I started geeking out and watching a lot of videos with Steven Erikson, who's the author of Malazan Book of the Fallen. He has some amazing advice for writers, just some of the best. And I know he's writing a book right now on writing.
Oh,
But
okay.
there are wonderful videos on his it's not developmental editor, advanced reader. The advanced reader for the Malazan series, including the books by Ian C. Esselmont, is AP Canavan from the channel A Critical Dragon, who also has amazing videos as well. And he has some great talks with Steven Erikson on his channel and with Ian C. Esselmont. But they've talked a lot about prose and characters and world building and have gotten me to look at books in ways I just never imagined I could look at them before. And so I'm kind of a geek and I love watching writing advice videos, even though I have no interest in being a writer. I just find the writing process and craft so fascinating. And these three things I think are so interconnected. They really, really are. Now, I know that I don't know if Philip Chase is still in the chat or not, but I know Philip Chase is constantly recommending Ursula K. Le Guin's From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, the essay on fantasy prose, and that one of the things that she makes a case for is also how interconnected this is, especially with world building. That so much of the time your prose is painting the world. So I think that that's also important. Like I think that good prose immerses you in a setting, it immerses you in the world, and it also builds the character, but also you get to know the world and the setting usually at its best through the character lens. Of course, this can depend on narration style and levels of focalization and all that, but generally it's through the character's perspective. But good character work is, I think, dependent on good prose. Like if you think about like good dialogue, great character dynamics, a character who feels realistic or interesting in any sort of way, that's usually because the prose created that. It's the prose that brought that to life. The prose is responsible for great dialogue, for great banter, for great internal thoughts and psychology. And then the world building is always going to be reflected through the character perspective, ideally, I would say. So, man, I really think they're all so interconnected in my mind. But
Yeah.
I have to say that I have read books before that I've loved that don't have characters as the main focus. Like, for example, Blood Meridian does have excellent characters. I will say that. But but I can also just appreciate, like I said, the atmosphere and the settings in and of themselves. And so, like, I become such a settings reader, but I'm also somebody who very much visualizes what I read. So I think that also plays a big role into that aspect as well. Long, complicated answer, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, no, I was hoping you would answer like that. So for these, I'm not going to make you pick one. So
sorry, I guess I didn't.
no, but I was hoping you expand on the connection between all of them, because that is something that I feel like you highlight very well in your book reviews, talking about the prose and what was so great about it, how it made you feel, how it painted that picture for you, how it made you connect to the characters, how it placed you in that setting. It is all really important. And, your descriptions really helped evolve me as a reader, because I think I told you in the Why Read discussion, when I started reading as an adult, I was all plot. I was all thrillers and I wanted all the plot twists. And I think expanding, especially into fantasy, which is strange because that's a different world, the emphasis would really be there. But it's also, the prose and the writing style, the connection to the characters. I've read some character-driven stories that have very low plot that I've really loved. So all of these things are so much more important than I ever realized. And I knew that you would agree with that as well.
Oh, 100%. So I can relate to you, Jack. I can relate to you 100% because especially when I started getting into fantasy again as an adult, because I went through a long reading slump for many years before I started reading fantasy again. like in 2017, 2016. I can't remember the exact year. And at that time, because I had gone to school, to graduate school, the way I was trained to write as a graduate student in an academic field was to use very non-stylized prose, as straightforward, as concise and succinct as possible. Take all the style out, use as few prepositions as possible,
Yep.
and don't use any superlatives. So that was the way I was trained to write. I had to learn how to strip style out completely of my writing. So I was taught that's good writing, to be as concise as possible. So when I started to read like Sanderson, for example, I didn't have any problem with it because I was like, like this is kind of I heard people say it was bad prose, but I was like, but he's very concise and succinct, and this is kind of the way I was taught to write as an academic. So yes, so like Laura says, it's really its own breed of writing. It's different. And then when I started to get into fantasy, I kind of blame Philip for this because I was watching his channel before I started a channel. And that's when he started talking a lot about prose and the importance of prose. And I was thinking, well, geez, I didn't think that was that important, And then it got me to start paying attention more. And then as I started to read, I started to notice that authors like Stephen Erickson, for example, who are able to write in a very powerful way, like able to elicit that sublime feeling we were talking about, it's because of their prose that they can evoke this whole spectrum of emotion and color and imagination in a way that you can't really get out of you can still get a lot of emotion from a very straightforward writing style. I still like straightforward writing styles, though. I mean, I should probably say that. But at the same time, I do have an appreciation for an author who can use words very purposefully. And I should, like I said, I don't think that good prose necessarily means dramatic prose or lyrical prose. I think that there could be a variety of different styles and uses. It's just about purpose and what the effect that the author is intending to create, is intending to elicit. So I think that's something I've become more mindful of. I've become more aware of how that affects me as a reader. And I think that's just going to naturally happen to us. The more that we read, the more we're going to start to pick up on those subtleties.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a good answer. Lots of insight there.
Thank you.
If you could have dinner with any author, alive or dead, who would it be?
Oh. Hey, Philip, are you still in the chat? Want to have dinner? Philip Chase is an author. That would be fun to have dinner with him, though. I had breakfast with him, though. I had breakfast with him and Stephen Erickson, as an author.
Yeah, like in person?
Really, yeah, in person. I met them all. So last year I went to the ICFA conference, and that was in Florida. And so I met up with Philip Chase, with Alan from the Library of Alexandria, with Jimmy from the Fantasy Network, and Stephen Erickson, and Stephen Donaldson actually was there too. He's the author of the Thomas Covenant series.
Okay.
It was kind of funny how I ended up meeting him, and AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon, who I was just talking about, is there too. And yeah, we all kind of planned it, but it was just a really special experience. So yeah, I sat down and had breakfast. It was so surreal. I sat right next to Stephen Erickson, and I was so shy. I was like, oh my goodness, I've been inside. I felt like, because when you read a 10-book series, especially of that length of somebody's writing, you're like, I've been in your mind like all year.
And I'm very personal. Yeah.
Right now. It felt very surreal to me. And so it was a very special experience. It was wonderful to spend time with all those people.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That's really
I kind of lived the dream. It was kind of the dream. And it was really special because I had already been friends with all of them before I met them in person. But then meeting them in person, it felt like it sealed the deal, It's like we're friends, but then we're breaking bread together, we're having breakfast.
Well, and it's different, like virtual friends versus like in person too. Like when you said you had breakfast with them, I was like a virtual brunch? Like,
no, I had real breakfast
my
with
pandemic brain is still like just the gatherings online. But no,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool. That's
Yeah,
neat.
I
So you'd have
did.
dinner with them. You'd have dinner with them again. You wouldn't pick
Oh, why
anybody
not?
different.
Why not? Maybe
Huh?
it'll happen.
Yeah. Hey, why not? Sounds good.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really special. Alan and I went to dinner actually with his wife a couple of nights before that in Orlando. So I got to meet him first. And then that morning, that Saturday morning, we all met up for breakfast at the conference. And Philip took me to the bookstore there and I bought it was so fun. It was so much fun. And then it was a very short trip though, unfortunately. So later that day I ended up at the airport and I think my flight had a delay and Jimmy's flight might have had a delay. I can't remember. But Jimmy and I ended up like hanging out in the airport. Just waiting at our gate, like hanging out and talking. And it was so surreal because
Fun.
I had been on Chatting with Nuts before, like on his live show before, but just sitting with him and chatting in the airport, I'm like, this feels like I'm just on Chatting with Nuts. Like it feels so natural. It feels like, but I'm in person. I don't know. It was cool. It was
Oh,
really
that's
cool.
so fun.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that. I want to go to a conference with you guys. I'll go to the next one.
All right. Do it.
Let's book it.
All right.
Okay, well, here's kind of a challenging one. If you could have the magical abilities from one book or series, but in this current world, which powers would you choose?
Let's see. What would I choose? This is the trickiest one for me to decide because I feel like most of the series I read, I would not want to be that character in that world, and I would not want I would not want to have that kind of magic. Oh,
But you'd have it in this world, so you still have electricity and
that's true. Good point.
and social media. So
That's a really good point. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that, and I started thinking about like A Song of Ice and Fire, and Daenerys with her dragons, and then there's Melisandre. She seems to have a lot of power, though. It's kind of mysterious how the Lord of Light works, but it sounds kind of cool because it seems like she's really powerful and manipulative. I don't know if I want that, but honestly, okay, I'll tell you what. I don't think I've ever read a book that has this specific feature before, but growing up, I remember watching a television show where a girl froze time. It was
ooh, yeah.
called, what was it called? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Out of This World, I think is the name of the show. It's
Okay.
really old show from like the 80s or something. But she would freeze time with her fingers. And I was so fascinated by that. I was like, I want to be able to freeze time. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? And not age. Like, if you could freeze time and not age.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the kicker. Yeah.
So, like,
Pretty cool.
what if you could freeze time during a beautiful sunset and you could just read for hours in the middle of the sunset and time isn't going on? You could catch up on sleep. You could
I was
do
gonna say I'd
anything
sleep
you
so much.
wanted. Oh, me too. I would sleep so much. Well,
Harry Potter powers, I think, count.
there you go. What is the thing that Hermione has? You know what I'm talking about? The ball
When
that,
she does the time travel, that one?
yeah. She's able to be two places at once. I forgot what that's called.
I don't know, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Somebody look it up for me.
Yeah,
please.
Matt knows the show you're talking about.
You remember
Yeah,
that show?
see?
Oh my goodness. that's
Look,
so
everybody kind of
cool.
remembers what you're talking about.
It makes me excited when people remember things like that.
Time
Yeah.
changer. Well, I always shy away from that one because there was an episode of Twilight Zone where this guy, all he wants is to read his books.
I know which one you're talking about.
And so that's all he wants, but everybody keeps bugging him. He never gets around to it. Well, like time, it either pauses or the world ends or something. And he's so excited. He has so much time to read and he like gets his whole pile of books. He goes to sit down and he steps on his glasses.
Oh, yeah,
So now
because
he has nothing but time, but he can't read.
because there's like a bomb that goes off and he's the only one in like a safe that's safe from the bomb. And so his glasses are the only glasses in the world that aren't shattered.
Yep.
So then he comes out of the bomb and everybody's dead. And at first it seems like it's devastating, but then he realizes I can read. I have all the books. The book survived. And he's like in heaven. And then he drops his glasses and they break.
Yeah.
It's so depressing.
I've
That's
never
such a good
forgotten
Twilight Zone. I love that one.
Yeah. No, Philip, we can't do it now. We just talked about it. Too much risk.
Oh,
Time
Yeah.
Turner.
Time Turner. Thank you so much, Laura.
Mm.
That's it. And Philip, I was just saying that you're the author I would want to have dinner with if I got to have dinner with an author.
Yeah. If you missed that, Philip, you were answered to number 9.
Yeah, got to talk about ICFA, so that was really fun.
Okay, so those are the 10 questions to get to know you as a reader. But now I have some tough ones for you. So I have 5 questions. Like I was saying at the start of this, they're typically would you rather questions, but I also rephrase some of them to be like a battle between 2 things that you have to choose. So we will start with number 1, just to ease you into it. Would you rather read a traditional quest trope or a nautical fantasy?
I don't think I knew about these questions.
No, you didn't. These are surprises. These are to put you on the spot, rapid fire. No time to prepare.
Dang.
Oh, this is the easiest one, Johanna. You're in for it.
I don't know. I love both.
Oh, but you have to pick.
I guess I'll go with the traditional quest trope.
Okay.
Though I did read, just recently read or finished War Host of Vastmark by Jenny Wirtz, and I feel like she blends quest and nautical elements really well too. So
yeah, that's
like I got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you can have a quest like on a ship. I was kind of struggling with that one, but see, for these questions, I researched you. I stalked your channel. You
did a good job.
And I went through like years, and I'm like, okay, I picked these up. So
and I'm reading a dance. Like I said, I'm rereading A Dance with Dragons right now, and I totally forgot that there are pirates in this world.
Oh, I love it.
There are pirates, and there's all types of like ship stuff, and yeah, there's like nautical elements and quest stuff in that book too. So yeah, it is tailor made for me for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then I thought I saw it because didn't Murphy take over your channel and recommend a wager, right? Like another like nautical book, and that's also on my TV. I'm going on a cruise next spring, summer. So I'm like looking for nautical books. So I added that one to my list. So
cool. Maybe we can both read it. I want to check out the audiobook. It's a nonfiction book. So I like nonfiction via audio. Maybe we'll both check it out and talk.
Yeah, that'd be so fun. So fun. Okay, so for question number 2, now you and I did the Game of Thrones live show together. And there was one topic we discussed. I think you might have even brought it up, but it's something that stuck with me. We were talking about the aspect of motherhood and how some of the characters are just fierce mothers. So I wanted to ask you who you thought would make a better babysitter, Cersei Lannister or Catelyn Stark?
Oh, Stark.
Yeah. See, and I haven't read all the books, so I don't know how they turn out as mothers. I'm really just going off this like first book.
Oh, yeah. It would be Catelyn. It would be Cat for sure.
Yeah.
Because Cersei, I think she'd be mean to any child. I mean, look at how she treats Sansa. Who's her lord?
Cersei is good to her own kids. I don't know if she'd be good to like other people's kids if she's babysitting.
Cersei or Catelyn? Wait, which one?
Cersei, I don't think would like kids other than her own.
Oh my gosh. So I think you need to read the second book. You need to continue on in the series, but it would definitely be Catelyn, without a doubt. Although, I mean, it's a good question because, yeah, Catelyn hated Jon, and she never trusted Theon, which was actually probably wise, but but as far, that's a good point. That's a good point about Jon, but I think there were different reasons for that. I would still definitely choose Catelyn.
Yeah, because they're both strong mothers, but I don't know if they're like maternal outside their own kids.
Just read on. Okay, but you even see it at the end of A Game of Thrones. You saw how she was with Sansa.
Yeah.
The daughter of a traitor.
True. Okay, so the next one, I was thinking about some of the books that I know you love, and I was thinking about some of the more obnoxious characters in those books. And I wanted to know, would you rather be stuck in an elevator with Jezal from First Law or the Fool from Farseer, specifically from Farseer? Because I know he pops up later in the series, but.
Oh, I'd say the Fool. I liked the Fool.
Yeah?
Yeah, I did.
I feel like I'd be hitting that emergency button.
I thought that was an interesting character.
Oh,
but
interesting for
I
sure.
probably wouldn't. Well, and I can't say anything about. I don't know if I can say anything about Giselle, but I'll say the Fool.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I picture the Fool to be talking in riddles the whole time we're stuck in the elevator, but Giselle just whining the whole time.
Yeah, it's probably true. That's probably accurate. Yeah.
Definitely the Fool. Man, I hope you have some like Tylenol with you. Because that would be rough.
I thought the Fool was interesting, though. He has an interesting
for sure. He's one of my favorite characters in Parseer.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
Okay, so your number 4 battle, we talked about the emphasis you have on prose. And there's, in some of your videos, you've talked about 2 authors specifically and how you love how they wrote their characters. So I want to know who wrote the better characters. First Law characters by Joe Abercrombie or Long Price Quartet characters?
That's hard. They're very different styles. Oh, man. That is really tough.
Talk it out. Who are you most connected to?
I think I'm going to go with Abercrombie, with the First Law characters. That's really, really tricky, though. Goodness. I have a lot to say. I'm going to try my hardest to get a Long Price Quartet review out soon and talk a lot about the characters because it's such a character-focused story. And Abraham has a gift for writing characters aging over time, both male and female characters. And I have such an appreciation for the way he makes these characters mature over time. And it makes them so human. Like his characters, to me, here's what I'd say. With Abraham's characters, not only do they age really well over time, like he shows them aging in a way that's very convincing and it's very realistic, but he also does he grounds his characters into making them feel like real people. They live in a fantasy world, but they feel very fallible. They feel like real people to me. They feel like they have real grounded flaws, relatable flaws. Whereas with Abercrombie's characters, I think Abercrombie's characters, they highlight aspects of our human nature. They highlight our human flaws. They bring them out. But I think that, and this is an unpopular opinion, I'm certain, but I think his characters to me feel a little embellished, but not in a bad way. I wouldn't change a single thing about that. I love that they're slightly embellished.
They're extreme.
Maybe it's because of his prose and his style, but I feel like every time I picture the characters, like if I picture Glocta, and if I pictured Giselle, and if I pictured Logan Ninefingers, if I pictured seeing these people in real life, they almost come across to me like people that, have you ever seen like characters, slightly caricatured characters? Like they could almost be wearing makeup or masks that are human, but slightly exaggerated. Like that's how I see them in my head. So they're very different. One is more stylized, but it brings out the humor and it brings out those aspects of human nature, I think, in a much more hilarious way. Whereas I don't think that's what Abraham is going for. Abraham's characters feel very grounded in reality. They really feel like real people in their most like frail, in their frailty. They feel more frail.
I like it. That's a good description.
Yeah.
Abercrombie's character is less realistic, but more vivid. Absolutely.
They are. Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. They are more vivid too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think that they're embellished. Like, I don't think of them as like, I don't think of them as the most like realistic. Like, I can't imagine bumping into any of them in real life without them sticking out in a crowd.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, for your review, I'll be really interested to know how I can get my hands on a copy of that bind up of Long Price Quartet. So please comment on that in your video review, because it is not on Amazon for like under $800 or something crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that because I've been asked that question quite a few times. I was very lucky that a friend gifted me the bind up I have, but it's impossible to find that bind up anymore. It's out of print. unless you want to pay for it used for like over $100, as you mentioned. So in
Yeah.
that case, I would recommend there are 2 omnibus editions that are reasonably priced. So the Long Price Quartet is a quartet. There are 4 stories, but in the first omnibus, you have the first 2 books, and then in the second omnibus, you have the second 2 books. So the second omnibus I know is called The Price of Spring. That's actually the name of the last book as well, but it has both the 3 and 4. And then the first one is Summer and Winter, I think. I can't remember, but it's the first 2. Mhm.
Awesome.
Probably. That's a good point.
That's fair.
That's a good point.
So lucky, Matt. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think
I
you
need to
can
get
find them
copies.
sometimes like in used bookstores, maybe Changing Hands or Bookman's where you
Yeah, I'll
live.
have to keep an eye out. I want it. I want it bad.
Yeah, I wish the bind up was more widely available though.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is. I hate when they do that, when they go out of print.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the last would you rather question, I was still in the dinner mindset. I think I wrote these when I was hungry. But in your videos, you've talked about 2 characters, and they seem to be very intellectual, very philosophical. So I was wondering who would be better for dinner conversation. So who would you rather have dinner with, Piranesi or William Stoner?
Oh, Stoner.
Yeah, better
I'm down.
conversation?
So I was actually saying this in our discussion the other day.
Mhm.
I can't remember if I said it when we were recording or not, but I said that I want to interview this character probably more than any other character in fiction. I just have so many questions for him. I have so many questions. And he's somebody who's very introverted to the external world, like very, very introverted, very internal character. But there is just so much to him. There are so many layers there that I just want to keep peeling back the onion. I keep wanting to just dig deeper into this character. And with Piranesi, I loved Piranesi. I think Piranesi was, wow, that book is so powerful. And I think, well, the funny thing is, Laura, and I think this is why I put these 2 books together in my mind so much, is because Piranesi is also what I would consider more of like an internal character as well. They would probably both be super silent at the dinner table.
It's a one-on-one dinner, so you can get them to come out of their shell, I'm
It
sure.
would be crickets galore. Yeah. No, I think they would be interesting for sure. Both of them. I love both characters.
Yeah, see, they're the same.
Yeah, I love this character. I love Stoner so much.
I'm gonna go order that as soon as we get off this live show. Like, I'm convinced. I can't wait to see the live show discussion when it's posted.
I hope you like it. I hope you like it. It's an interesting story because it's, like it's such a simple, straightforward story on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there's a lot there to unpack. A lot there. Yeah, we'll have to talk.
Yeah, that's the kind of mood I'm in right now, kind of like a lit fic kind of mood. So
cool. Okay.
So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is it for the questions. See, that wasn't too difficult for the would you rather questions. I took it easy on you.
Yay, thank you so much. This was fun. I love that you paid so much attention with those rapid fire questions. Like with all the questions, I was just impressed. I'm like, wow, she actually really listened to me and paid attention to me.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
That made me feel so loved. So
good. Well, you are loved. Thanks for all you do on BookTube. And yeah, it's hard because I watch all your videos all the time, but a lot of these books I haven't read yet. So to form a question around them could be kind of difficult. So I'm sitting here like Googling and trying to look stuff up, but then not spoiling myself. So but some of those definitely stood out. So thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed and sharing the love of reading with all of us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yay. Thank you so much, Jack. And thank you everybody in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode of the Biblio Files. And be sure, if you're not already subscribed to Johanna's channel, please do that. And of course, Jack in the Book Stack, so you can catch all the future interviews. Thank you so much, everybody.